Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says Geneva Conventions and the Russia-Ukraine War. Let us try and understand what is this article all about. For the last few weeks, we have been discussing about the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We have discussed the international orders. We have discussed about the violations committed by Russia. We have also discussed about the sanctions imposed by the Western countries. While we discuss all these geopolitical ramifications, what we have also forgotten is about the war ethics. So one of the international convention which speaks about war ethics happens to be the Geneva Convention. Why is this in news? That is because whenever there is a war, it is a fight between two combatants. But in this particular case, there will also be civilians, there will be non-combatants as well, then there will be civilian infrastructure as well. How is this regulated? As per the international convention is what is this Geneva Convention all about. So basically you have combatants, that is the army, which is in conflict when two countries are fighting with each other, but there are also non-combatants, there are also civilians, and there are also soldiers who are injured not participating in the war. How are they being treated? How should they be treated? What is the protocol in picture? What are the conventions that are in place? Is what is this Geneva Convention all about? When we speak about Geneva Convention, what is it? It is a set of 4 treaties, 3 additional protocols which codify widely accepted ethical and legal international standards for the humanitarian treatment of those impacted by the war. Let me simplify this process for you. So as I told you, there are two parties here. One, the Russian party, the other is the Ukraine. So what we have is an armed conflict. So in this particular armed conflict, how are we going to take care of the people, for which what we have is 4 conventions under the Geneva Convention followed by 3 additional protocols. So the focus of the conventions is the treatment of non-combatants and the prisoners of war. As I told you, there are about 4 conventions when it comes to the Geneva Conventions. What we have is the first convention, second, third, as well as the fourth. Then what we also have is protocols called as Protocol 1, Protocol 2 and Protocol 3. So what is this Convention 1? Basically, there are people who are involved in war. There are people who are combatants, which means there is army that is representing one side. There is army from the other side as well. In this particular case, let's take an example. We have people who are from the armed forces of Ukraine. Let's assume for a moment these people were hit by the Russian forces. So what happens? These people are no more in the combatant role. Why? Because they are now injured. So the first convention is speaking about those soldiers who are injured, which means these are the wounded soldiers, these are the sick soldiers who are fighting a war with another country. And where is it happening? It is happening on land. So when you have two parties fighting out a war, soldiers fighting out a war, they become injured. How is the response that has to be done during this war is what is called as the first convention. So convention 1 is speaking about protection of the wounded and the sick soldiers. What about this particular convention? Whenever there is an injured soldier, he is not a threat to another party. So what happens? This person has to be taken care of. Who has to take care of this person? There has to be a medical personnel, there has to be medical workers. So apart from the soldiers, the opposition party, that is the aggressor state, should not touch the wounded soldiers and the medical personnel is what is called as the Convention 1. So basically, when we are speaking about Convention 1, when there is hostility between one party with another, it ensures humane treatment to all those soldiers who are injured, irrespective of which race, color, sex, religion, faith. All this does not matter. Ultimately, it ensures that there is prohibition of torture to the injured soldiers. So, and at the same time, while we speak about Convention 1, medical personnel are the ones who are taking care of these injured soldiers. they also will have to be taken care of. So the Convention 1 includes those injured soldiers as well as the medical personnel. They need to be respected. They should not be hit. They should not be injured is what is Convention 1. Then we have the Convention 2. What is this Convention 2? The Convention 2 is an extension of the Convention 1. When we spoke about the Convention 1, where was it happening? It was happening on land. When it comes to the Convention 2, it is happening at sea. So this deals with the protection of the wounded, sick and shipwrecked military. So those army personnel who are working for a country, who are on the ships, if they are injured, they will also have to be protected. Their medical personnel will also have to be protected. Remember, when we are speaking about Convention 1 and Convention 2, we have to keep in mind that such people should not be a problematic people to the opposition party. So while we speak about Convention 1 and Convention 2, we have to remember that such people should not take up their arms. They should refrain from any act of hostility, which means they should not be the aggressor and they should completely surrender. They should not do any illegal act or kill an opposition party. So they should refrain from committing the violent act. Only then we have Convention 1 and Convention 2 falling in place. So the Convention 1 is happening on land. It is about the injured soldiers. How well are we going to take care of the injured soldiers is Convention 1, which is happening on land. Convention 2 is about sea, where you have the injured soldiers and their medical personnel who are also taken into picture, where humanitarian conditions are provided to such people. Now what we have is the Convention 3. The Convention 3 basically speaks about the prisoners of war. Who are these prisoners of war? Let's say, for example, there are two parties who are fighting. One party which has surrendered to another party. So the soldiers who have surrendered during that armed conflict is what is called as the prisoners of war. India and Pakistan had also fought. India had about 93,000 prisoners of war from Pakistan. So those soldiers, those armed people who surrender to the opposition or to an hostile state is what is called as the prisoners of war. So in the prisoners of war, they should also be protected if they surrender is what is called as the Convention 3. And finally, what we have is the Convention 4. So the Convention 4 protects the civilians, including those in the occupied territory, which means that as of now, when we spoke about Convention 1, 2 and 3, it was about respecting the soldiers because they've given up on the arms, protecting them and the medical personnel because they're taking care of these soldiers. But Convention 4 is primarily about civilians. So if we are speaking about Russia's invasion of Ukraine, what comes into picture primarily is the Convention 4. Why Convention 4? That is because it has been said that some of the areas captured by Russia, human rights were not respected, civilians were not respected. In fact, the civilian infrastructure was also hit as well. So this article goes on to speak primarily about Convention 4, which is that Russian aggression on Ukraine led to violation of Convention 4 of the Geneva Conventions. Added to it, we also have Protocol 1 as well. What does Protocol 1 speak about? It speaks about giving the clarity to some of the terms of the convention. So Protocol 1 relates to the protection of victims of international armed conflicts. So basically, let's say for example, there is a deceased person, a person who's passed away. How this person who's passed away, his body has to be treated. Let's say there are cultural artifacts or dangerous targets. Let's say for example, the dams or the nuclear installations, how these will also have to be protected is given under Protocol 1 of 1977 of the Geneva Convention. Then we have Protocol 2, which deals with protection of victims of non-international armed conflicts. And finally, what we have is Protocol 3, which is about the adoption of additional distinctive emblem of red crystal in addition to Red Cross and Red Crescent. What does Protocol 3 mean? Let's say for example, if there are people working in such war hit regions, if they are wearing clothes which has these symbol, it means that they are working for the humanitarian assistance. So a country or the hostile country should not indeed hit these people, should not engage in war with such people, and they should let go these people because they are engaging in the humanitarian assistance is what is the protocol 3. So basically in this case of Russian invasion of Ukraine, what we are witnessing is Russia's aggression where they have violated some of the protocols and conventions, says this article. When you look into which are the countries which are signatory to all these conventions, the Geneva Conventions have been ratified by 196 states, including all UN member states. The three protocols have been ratified by 174, 169 and 79 states respectively. Now, if you look into the fact, has Russia violated the convention? To a larger extent, yes, and at the same time, no as well. Why no? In 2019, perhaps anticipating the possibility of invading Ukraine in the near future, Russia withdrew its declaration. So, if you're going by the real convention, whether they are party to the convention or not, since they have withdrawn from this particular declaration, they might not have committed any violation of the convention, but ideally, since it is an international order where we are speaking about ethics, you can also assume that Russia has committed some of the violations of the Geneva Convention. Now, the important question is, how will this be executed? We have Article 8 of the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, which clearly points out that it is the International Criminal Court which has the jurisdiction when it comes to the war crimes. So, what are war crimes? These refers to grave breaches of the Geneva Convention, including willful killing, torture, inhuman treatment, including biological experiments, willfully causing greater suffering, serious injury to body or health, extensive destruction and appropriation of property, not justified by military necessity and carried out unlawfully, wantonly, compelling a prisoner of war and other protected person to serve in the forces of a hostile power, willfully depriving a prisoner of war or other person of their rights of fair and regular trial, unlawful deportation or transfer, or unlawful confinement, taking number of hostages. This means that a country has committed a war crime and it is the International Criminal Court which has the power to look into this particular issue. Now the question is Geneva Convention able to hold on to the war ethics? Examples point out no. Why? Because we have some of the permanent members of the United Nations who have themselves violated the Geneva Conventions. Let's take the example of United States of America. United States of America led coalition attack on Raqqa in Syria killed as many as 1,600 civilians. Then the destruction of civilian infrastructure in Aleppo and Idlib by the Russian forces. Then the war in Yemen where Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates led coalition killed and injured thousands of civilians. All this clearly point out that you have these permanent member of the United Nations Security Council who themselves have violated the Geneva Conventions. So what is that we have to understand here? Yes, we do have the laws, we do have the conventions, we do have the rules that are prescribed, but unfortunately the permanent members are not themselves keeping up to the Geneva Conventions. So going forward, what this convention has been able to do is to a minimal extent, to a limited extent, has been able to create the deterrent effect. In case they have violated, some of the other countries have come together, they have also imposed sanctions as well, and at the same time these Geneva Conventions were able to ensure that the human rights awareness is given to multiple countries world over. So the success of the Geneva Convention may look limited, but at the same time it has been able to create an awareness of war ethics and about human rights, which basically means that countries know about it and may to a limited extent could have acted as a deterrent as well. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says villages along China border to open for tourism. What is this article? Let's look into the context. The Union government plans to open the villages along the Chinese border for tourists under the Vibrant Village program announced in the Union Budget of 2022 and 23. So what are we going to speak about? We are speaking about the Vibrant Village program initiated by the Government of India along the border areas in the northeastern part of India where there are borders with China. So let's understand what is this Vibrant Village program? What was the necessity for the government to come up with such a program? What does this program mean? What would be its significance and what is the way forward with respect to this Vibrant Village program? First up, we have to understand why did the government come up with such an initiative? When we look at India's borders with China, ever since the year 2017, what we have seen is a large-scale construction activity along the border areas of India and China. So basically, we have the Chinese forces who are able to increase the infrastructural support along the border areas of India. So what they have been able to do is strengthen their presence, increase the villages along the border area of India and China. So what have they done? They have increased the construction along the India-China border. They have also developed the dual-use airports. What do we mean by dual-use airports? One, it is for the civilian purposes. The other is for the defense purposes. Ever since the year 2017 and after 2020, where we have had issues with China along the line of actual control, they have developed these dual-use airports. These dual-use airports are one used for the civilians, where it is used for the movement of the civilians, and at the same time they are also being used by the defense personnel as well. So what is China doing? It is developing the villages along India and China border, and at the same time it is developing the physical infrastructure, airports, railways, roads, so on and so forth, so that it can also be used not only by the civilians but also by the defense personnel as well. So what has China done? It has infused a large number of economic infrastructure projects, and it has also provided economic incentives so that people from other parts of China can easily relocate to the border areas of India and China. There might be Chinese citizens who might be present in different parts of China. But what is China doing? It is also providing them economic incentives. This is about the annual subsidies given to such people who move to the border areas of India and China across the China's border. So basically, if there are Tibetans who are located in Tibet, if there are other section of people who are located in other parts of China, they are asked to move into this particular area. And how are they doing it? By providing the economic incentives. So the Chinese are able to develop infrastructure, and at the same time they are also crowding the people along the borders of India and China. Added to it, there are nomads who are also dispatched with their herds of goat, sheep and yak to settle near the borders, so that this entire border area is populated, and eventually China has a pattern of claiming such area. They may also advance in the near future and ultimately capture a territory as well. In order to further increase the support to this part of the area, they have also increased the tourism projects in this area. So what do we understand? Infrastructure is being increased. Then you also have the defense forces who are actively involved in this particular case. Subsidies are provided so that people come up to this particular area. And finally, tourism related sectors are also being encouraged across the India as well as the Chinese border. This is one part of the story where China has been able to increase the infrastructure, and there is excessive migration that is happening along the border areas. But when it comes to the Indian side, there is a major problem. What is the problem? On the Chinese side, what we are witnessing is migration. So there are people who are coming from other parts of China towards the border areas. But when it comes to India, what we have is the out migration. People are leaving the border areas. They are entering other urban areas. In fact, they're letting go all their houses as well and coming to newer parts of India as well. Let me give you one of the example. In Uttarakhand, for example, there are about 185 villages in 3 districts bordering Tibet called as Uttarkashi, Chamoli and Pithagur, where these cities, these towns, these regions are also called as ghost villages. Why? Because number of people have left their villages along the border areas and look for greater pastures, and they have moved away from the border areas as well. When we look into the Chinese side, these have the modern infrastructure, they have all the modern facilities, and even if India has developed these villages along the border areas, India had not provided the modern facilities. So on one side, what we actually see is there is migration along the Chinese side, but from the Indian side there is out migration. On the Chinese side there is modern facilities provided to the villages, but on the Indian side these modern facilities were not provided. In order to overcome all these issues, what we have is a program called as the Vibrant Village program. So what is this Vibrant Village program? This is an initiative of the central government where it wants to enhance on the development of infrastructure, improve the connectivity projects, and ultimately prevent the out migration from the border areas. In order to give a boost to this, what we have is this particular program initiated by the government of India. So what are the features or measures under this particular program? The program will address road connectivity with emphasis on construction bridges, culverts, foot suspension bridges, retaining walls and ropeways along the border areas, in housing and village infrastructure, disaster resilient housing, vibrant village multipurpose center, schools, health and wellness centers, drinking water and sanitation facilities which would be provided, and added to it television and telecom connectivity will be another focus area to provide direct to home, mobile and internet connectivity. So basically, in spite of India providing the advanced modern facilities were not provided along the border areas, but going forward these will be provided so that people do not shift their bases from along the border areas to outside areas. Why does this become important? That is because we have to understand for the fact that when there are people along the border areas, it is these people who would be able to give all the information to the army personnel. If there is a Chinese personnel or a Chinese citizen entering our border areas, it is these people who would also have a vigilant eye as well. It is these people who would give the information to the Indian army people. But if these people are not present, who would give the information? And this would ultimately mean there would be incursions, there would be conflicts, and this may also result in armed conflict as well. So the importance of people along the border areas is very important, and the government is wanting to prevent the out migration. Added to it, with the construction of all the infrastructure, the government also intends to boost the tourism in this part of the segment. So boosting the tourism in this area will be an add-on that the government has taken up. What would be the advantage of tourism? Once we have the tourism, what would happen? There will be development of this area. So the government intends we will provide all the infrastructure. So there will be infrastructural development that would happen. All the basic amenities would be provided, modern facilities would be provided, and since there is infrastructural development, people would start thronging to this particular area, and as a result, people who did not have any of the economic activities now have the economic activity. Now they also have the employment opportunities. Now they have people coming and interacting with them. They also have their fellow citizens coming up and speaking to them. So what you have is an economic interaction. What you have is a continuity of this particular project, because tourism ultimately means that there'll be more number of people visiting this particular area, and ultimately new economic opportunities will also open up as well. This ultimately means the out migration will be replaced by reverse migration, where people would come back to their border areas. So what would this mean? This means that the out migration is restricted, reverse migration takes place, and ultimately infrastructural support is also taken care, so the land boundaries will remain intact. So you would have the vigilant people who would keep an eye along the border areas and ultimately notify if there are any changes along the border areas. This is the intention of the government of India. However, there is one small concern here. What is the concern? As of now, to this particular program, we can call it as a reactive approach. What is this reactive approach? China created villages. China created the modern facilities. It was only after China did, India was able to expand it. But now going forward, when it comes to the border areas, border area management, what we require is a proactive approach. So instead of being reactive, we need to have proactive policies so that we can prevent any kind of adventure from China, is what is that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says children more unlikely to produce antibodies. Let us try and understand what is this article all about. There was a small study which involved about 108 participants. Out of 108 participants, 57 children and 51 adults were taken into a study. All the 108 participants were either asymptomatic or they had mild symptoms when it comes to the COVID-19. So these people were studied, their impact on the body with respect to the COVID-19 was studied, and finally the study found that a higher proportion of children did not produce antibodies in response to the SARS-CoV-2 infection. So what are we speaking about? We are speaking about the adults and the children. So what are we speaking about? We are speaking about the response to the COVID-19. So these children and the adults were compared and ultimately they came up with a conclusion. So whenever there is a COVID-19 virus that affects a person, what would happen? It would also lead to creation of the antibodies. What are these antibodies? This is the immune response given by the body. So this particular study goes on to say that if you consider the adults and the children, antibodies were released into the body of the adults, but it was not the same for the children. When we look into the statistics further, only 20 of the 54 children produced the antibodies, and when we compare it to the adults, 32 of the 42 adults got the antibodies. So what we have is a comparison that despite the viral load being the same, adults were able to generate more antibodies, and when you look at children, the number of antibody producing children were comparatively less as well. So the inference that we can draw is that in spite of they not developing the antibodies, they have had a stronger and a faster response to it. That is one inference. The other inference is that children are able to clear the virus so quickly that the immune system is not triggered to produce antibodies against the virus. In the near future, children may not be protected against the reinfection, says this article. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says the flight of the brooms. What is this article speaking about? The article here is speaking about the broom grass, or what is called as Thiasolona maxima. What is it? This happens to be a plant whose plant has been used as a broom. So it is grown by the people of Tiwa, Karbi and Kazi communities where in the state of Assam. So let's look at some of the important factual data with respect to the broom grass. Karbi Anglong is the largest producer of brooms in India. Cultivation of broom grass is comparatively easy and requires only small financial input. It can be grown on marginal lands, wasteland and in Jim follow land. It grows well on a wide range of soils from sandy loam to clay loam. The planting can be done by seeds or rhizomes. The harvesting starts from February and continues till March end. About 90% of the produce is sold during March and April. The rest is used by the farmers themselves. So what is the significance of this broom grass cultivation? One, it helps in generation of the employment. Second, it enhances the rural income. Number of women who are also participating in this cultivation have also become empowered over a period of time. Added to it, the leaves from the green forage can also be used for the livestock. The roots also promote the conservation as well, and ultimately it also prevents the landslides by retaining the moisture and fertility in this part of the region. So remember, the broom grass is a unique gift which has been an eco-friendly product and close to the nature. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says Park seeks joint probe into missile incident. This article has been explained in yesterday's daily quiz fact of the day. Kindly look into it. What are we speaking about? We are speaking about the accidental firing of a missile, which has been explained in our yesterday's daily quiz. So with respect to that incident where we had a missile which had fallen in the territory of Pakistan, Pakistan says that it is not only India which has to conduct this particular inquiry. What we require is a joint inquiry conducted both by Pakistan as well as India. A single inquiry by India is not acceptable to Pakistan, but a joint inquiry will have to be taken up where the Pakistani forces will also have to be included in this particular study, says the Pakistan forces. What is the protocol with respect to the missile test has been explained in our yesterday's daily quiz. Kindly look into it. Now let's look into the mains practice question. Write a note on Geneva Convention and evaluate its success. Next question. The launch of the Vibrate Village program to improve social and financial infrastructure in remote habitations along the border with China is seen as a matter of vital interest to India. Discuss. So please write all your answers on the comment section. Peer review. Do give positive feedback to your friends' answers. So that's it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.